Hello, good day, and I'm very happy to start the presentation called Gamification and the Politics of Visibility in Higher Education. Thank you for the opportunity to present our research. This presentation explores gamification in higher education from a perspective that goes beyond motivation and engagement. We argue that gamification should be understood not only as a pedagogical technique, but also as an institutional mechanism that shapes visibility within contemporary universities. Our study examines how gamified systems influence what becomes visible, measurable, and valuable in academic environments, and how these processes intersect with governance, digital platforms, and institutional performance. The growing integration of artificial intelligence, learning analytics, and digital learning platforms is transforming higher education. Universities today increasingly rely on data-driven systems that make academic activities visible, measurable, and comparable. Within this environment, gamification is no longer simply a teaching strategy. It becomes part of a broader infrastructure through which institutions monitor participation, communicate performance, and demonstrate innovation. Understanding this transformation is important because visibility itself is becoming a key institutional resource. Most existing research on gamification concentrates on students' motivation, engagement, and participation. While these dimensions are important, they provide only a partial understanding of gamification's role in higher education. Far less attention has been devoted to questions as visibility, governance, surveillance, and institutional communication. As a result, the broader implications of gamification for university management and digital governance remain underexplored. Gamification in higher education functions not only as a pedagogical tool, but as an institutional regime of visibility through which universities organize measurable participation, data-driven evaluation, and communicable academic performance. This slide presents the central argument of our research. We propose that gamification operates as a regime of visibility. In this sense, gamification does not merely encourage participation, it organizes how participation is recorded, measured, displayed, and evaluated. Through points, budgets, rankings, dashboards, and analytics, universities create systems that define what counts as visible academic activity and what remains invisible. Our theoretical framework combines insights from game studies, sociology, media studies, and critical educational research. Classical theories on play help us understand the nature of games and playful engagement. At the same time, concepts developed by Foucault, Williamson, and Beer allow us to examine how digital systems create forms of visibility, measurement, and governance. This interdisciplinary perspective helps us move beyond purely pedagogical interpretation of gamification. A key transformation occurs when play enters institutional environments. Play is traditionally associated with freedom, imagination, experimentation, and uncertainty. Gamification, however, translates these experiences into measurable activities. Participation becomes quantifiable through scores, badges, rankings, and performance indicators. As a result, playful experiences are increasingly converted into visible data that can be monitored and evaluated. Gamified systems create infrastructures of visibility. Their purpose is often presented as motivational, but their effects go much further. By determining what can be counted, visualized, and displayed, these systems shape institutional understandings of learning and participation. Visibility is therefore not neutral. It reflects specific assumptions about what educational success should look like. One of our most important observations is what we call the paradox of visibility. Many activities become highly visible because they are easy to measure. At the same time, some of the most meaningful aspects of learning remain difficult to quantify. Critical thinking, reflection, creativity, and informal collaboration often generate significant educational value, yet they frequently remain outside systems of measurement. This creates tensions between visible participation and invisible learning. Gamification should also be understood at the institutional level. Universities increasingly use digital systems to communicate innovation, demonstrate performance, and strengthen their competitive position. Gamified platforms contribute to institutional branding and support broader cultures of ranking and evaluation. In this context, visibility itself becomes a form of institutional capital. At this stage, we do not present final empirical conclusions. Instead, we would like to highlight several preliminary observations emerging from our comparative exploration of digital learning environments. Our initial findings suggest that students increasingly orient their behavior towards forms of participation that are visible within platform-based systems. Achievements represented through points, badges, progress indicators, and completion rates become important markers of success. At the same time, analytics dashboards reinforce the visibility of measurable engagement by transforming learning activities into data that can be monitored, compared, and communicated. However, our observations also reveal a significant tension. While certain forms of participation become highly visible, other educational processes remain difficult to capture. Reflective thinking, informal peer support, intellectual curiosity, and creative experimentation often generate substantial learning value, but frequently remain outside systems of measurement. These preliminary indications support our broader argument that gamification does more than motivate participation. It contributes to the construction of institutional visibility by defining which forms of learning become recognizable, measurable, and valuable within contemporary universities. This tension between visible participation and invisible intellectual practices represents one of the most important directions for the future development of our research. Our research adopts a comparative perspective. We draw on preliminary observations from university environments and digital learning platforms. Rather than presenting final conclusions, we focus on emerging patterns and analytical directions. Initial empirical indications suggest important tensions between measurable participation and less visible intellectual practices. These findings motivate further comparative investigation. At this stage, our work generates a series of broader research questions. These questions concern not only gamification itself, but also the future of higher education in increasingly data-driven environments. We are particularly interested in understanding how platforms and artificial intelligence reshape academic participation and redefine educational value. The primary contribution of this research is conceptual. We introduce the idea of gamification as an institutional technology of visibility. This perspective connects debates from game studies, education, platform studies, and critical university research. It offers a new framework for understanding how digital educational environments shape both learning and governance. To conclude, we argue that gamification should not be viewed solely as a motivational tool. Its significance lies in its capacity to organize visibility within contemporary universities. Through gamified systems, institutions define what can be measured, recognized, and communicated as academic achievement. Therefore, the key question is no longer whether gamification works, but rather than what forms of knowledge, participation, and educational value become visible through it, and what remains hidden. Thank you for your attention and have a very nice day.